Good evening. Thank you so much to everyone who came here. And indeed, it's not the kind of documentary that one can enjoy, but I think that's the kind of documentary that is necessary. And for that, thank you so much, Olesia, for your work. I will invite you to join me on stage along Daria, your colleague from the Kyiv Independent. I think we can give you another round of applause for your work. And Oleksandr and his mother Tetiana are here as well, and I invite them as well to join me on stage right now. So we can have a sit. Yeah.
Тетяна, Олександр, я дуже рада, що ви сьогодні є в залі. Я вас запрошую також сюди. I'm inviting Tetiana and Oleksander. They're here with us, heroes of our documentary.
Sasha is joining us as well? Sasha is coming. Okay.
It was emotional, I think, yes. Sasha is here with us, but...
Tetiana, thank you so much for being here and for sitting through this documentary. For us, it's hard, but for you, of course, it's much harder. So thank you very much for being here. Also, thank you to the Pilecki-Institut and to Vich for organizing that and enabling Ukrainian voices. Or I'm a journalist living in Ukraine. I think now that the news cycle is slowly moving away from what's happening in Ukraine, which is still a full-scale war, which is still a war where war crimes are committed every single day against children, against the population. This is even more important that we meet today. I will start the questions. I will start the discussion with the journalists first, and I will also give Tetiana a little bit more time to settle here. Olesia, you're part of the investigative team at the Kyiv Independent. You're investigating war crimes, and abducting children is a war crime. Deporting children is a war crime. You worked for months, and you've realized that it's not just 19,000, which is already horrible, children that are being abducted. It's much, much more. How did you manage to cope with what you were finding? Because we are talking about war crimes that are at a scale that is unfathomable.
I don't know. Yes, of course, I'm a journalist, but you need to understand that I'm also Ukrainian, yes. And it's very important for me to bring to justice all of the war criminals who committed these crimes in Ukraine. And it seems that I can't do anything, only to do my work, yes, and to make such investigations.
And it allows the war criminals to be held accountable. We don't know when they will go to The Hague, but what you are finding are also enabling this process to go further.
Yes, we already passed all the materials and all of our findings to our prosecutors, to volunteers, to human rights defenders, and to UN commissioners.
Daria, you're also a journalist at the Kyiv Independent, and we've been talking ahead of this screening. We were talking about how this war is defined for us being Ukrainian or living in Ukraine, we very much consider that this is a genocidal war, and that's what Hannah was also saying earlier on. Genocide takes different aspects, and one of them is also to coerce children to forget their own language, to move away from their family. How do you perceive this specific aspect of war, which is deporting children in a country that is not theirs?
Yeah, well, Russia not only relocates these children and separates them from their families, as it was said in the movie, in the documentary, Russia also tries to erase their Ukrainian identity, because we know that these kids in Russia, in Russian-occupied Crimea, where they are held, they are often forbid to speak Ukrainian, to talk about Ukraine. Even saying that I am Ukrainian is forbidden, and children can get punished for that. And this is a part of the genocidal policy, the whole genocidal policy of Russia against Ukraine, because like erasing an identity, you know, that's why we call it the genocidal war. Yeah.
And in the documentary, that's something that is made very clear, is that Russia presents it as evacuation, as saving children. Saving from what? Because those children were actually safe before Russia invaded Ukraine. This is part of Russian propaganda. What do you make of it as journalists when you see this narrative also being taken in foreign media?
It was my aim, yes, to show and to investigate that it wasn't evacuation or salvation, it was deportation, and we have strong evidence of that. Russian militaries and Russian-controlled officials, they violated international humanitarian law and Geneva Conventions, evacuated, yes, in process of so-called evacuating children. They should give a chance for families and for children to evacuate on to the territory controlled by Ukraine. But in fact, people didn't have such choice. They have only one way to save their lives, yes, to be deported to Russia.
Yeah, well, I can jump on that. Deportation is not only when you're, forced physically, like there is a soldier with a gun and he's telling you that you have to go to Russia. No, if Russia's occupation and the way these people live under Russian occupation, this is the constant threat to life, constant threat to the life of their children. It forces them to send their kids to the camps, to send their kids to Russia. Yes, they agree to that, but this is what we want to stress, that this is also deportation, is not evacuation. And I wanna add that everyone who thinks and who says that it's evacuation should reconsider in sake of their own reputation, because the arrest warrant for Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova, it's kind of it's a sign that it's not evacuation like Russia claims, it's deportation, and Putin will be held accountable for that.
And you've touched upon something that we need to explain as well. It might not be very clear when we talk about deportation to Russian territory. It can also be deportation in occupied territory, and that's sometimes like a gray zone when we don't know where the children are. They are still in Ukraine as internationally recognized, but they are in occupied territory. And Tetiana was saying in the documentary, I'm 2.5 hours away from my children and I cannot see them. And there's thousands of children who are not far away from home, but they are unable to contact their family, and that also constitutes a war crime. And also there's that confusion in other countries. They don't understand if the parents agreed. Could we explain exactly, like when a child is taken away, sometimes it's on false pretense, is, oh, we're going to send them to a camp or further away from the front line. Can you explain to us?
Yeah, well, basically, Russia can... there are several scenarios how the deportation happens. Russia either kills parents or takes the children directly from orphanages or medical facilities, but it also can, provide children with this opportunity, kind of, to go for several weeks. They claim that it will take several weeks to the recreational camps, just to, to keep them away from the hostilities and from the war zone, and. This we think is deportation as well, because even though parents do give their consent to send their children to this camp or to a certain facility, it wouldn't have happened if Russia had not occupied and invaded the territory. So I think...
And if the children weren't in immediate danger of being shelled, parents would take another decision, of course. And parents wouldn't give away their children forever. Yeah. Tetiana, I would like to ask you a question. We see you in the documentary. You're still very much moved when you see those pictures. You were very close to your children. You decided yourself that you would fight for your country. You were a combat medic. Were you, when you were in duty and you found out that you didn't know how to contact your children, did you consider, when you considered going there and your mother says, I'm gonna travel to give them back to you, what was your state of mind? How did you manage to keep hope?
Справа в тому, що просто була завжди надія на те, що все ж таки не було конкретної інформації на кшталт того, що трапилось, не трапилось. Тобто була просто якби невідомість, а надія все ж таки залишалась. І дякуємо побратимам, які були поруч, які самі були в таких самих же ситуаціях. Нас просто було дуже багато. Дуже багато моїх побратимів не знали, що з їхніми дружинами, з дітьми, з батьками так само. І ми просто підтримували настільки один одного, що просто... Це давало сили, і кожна мить, кожна якась інформація, або десь щось ми обмінювались і сподівалися все-таки ж на те, що все-таки будуть гарні новини, але не у всіх були гарні новини, і кожен день поступала якась дуже така інформація, були дуже тяжкі такі ситуації, що навіть не знали, прокинемось там, або взагалі день той пройде. Тобто, завдяки ж ми просто купкою трималися і підтримували один одного, але було дуже тяжко, але ми справились. На даний час ми підтримуємо один одного і зараз досі справляємося з цією ситуацією, але так.
I will shortly translate. So, because there was no concrete information about what exactly was going on, they still had hoped. They had this hope in their mind. There were many people who felt the same, who didn't know where their parents, children, or spouses were. And every single information that they had or found out gave somehow hope. But not everyone has gotten this good news. There were many awful situations whether they didn't know whether they will wake up and live through the day. And it was very hard, and they only managed it with the support of each other.
Thank you. Indeed, we are talking about the silver lining here, the children who went back, but that's only a drop in the ocean compared to the thousands of children whose whereabouts we still don't know. At the very end of the documentary, you were stating that you identified a Russian family, so that allows for the parents to try and get their children back. Can you elaborate a little bit on that case?
You mean about families who took Ukrainian children, yes, in their
You
homes.
said you identified
Yes.
one of the Russian foster families?
Yes. We had a list of 31 children who were, yes, deported from Ukraine to Russia, and I received that list from human rights defenders, and I started to identify every child from that list. And you see there were a lot of information in Russian media about them. It's like, for Russians, it's great, yes, to take a Ukrainian child to their family. And Maria Lvova-Belova show like an example for all the Russians how they should do. They also should take Ukrainian children to their families, but there are also war criminals. And almost all of them, as you saw, they lived in Moscow region. Yes, they already have some children in their families. We know that the condition in their families are not the best. They're under control of their so-called foster parents. They can't use social media. Yes, and it's even hard to give a message here to Ukraine that they want to come back. And yes, our prosecutors also claim that there are maltreatment there, and I don't know even how we should deal with all of that when all of these children would come back home.
You've touched upon the treatment they're receiving, so it can be psychological abuse. They cannot talk about their family, they cannot use Ukrainian language, physical abuse as well. And then there's another form of abuse, which is to try and impose Russian culture on them, and there's military education and the like. Can you tell us what kind of indoctrination those children go through? Daria or Olesia?
We know, for example, that Pylyp Holovnya was a participant of, I don't know, of Russian military studying. Yes, yes, some courses. And we know that some of that foster families that you show on a map, they're studying their children to be militaries, because some of them are ex-militaries, Russian ex-militaries. So they're sharing like their experience with our Ukrainian children. I don't know, these children should be very strong, yes, to save their Ukrainian identity during months and unfortunately years.
Well, basically, what we will have, I think, as it feels now where we are going, because we need a lot to return these kids, but so far it looks like it might be, the whole like this generation of children who are spending over a year in Russia. They, even if they are returned to Ukraine, they might have a softer position on Russia, because, by separating kids from their parents and putting a lot of psychological pressure on them, Russia, for sure, it installs some ideas in their minds, and they might be hesitant regarding certain things and, have a softer position. on what Russia is doing. And regarding the punishments that they're getting I'm not sure about foster families. I remember one example from the story that we've published. There was a teenage boy who was taken from then Russian-occupied Kherson first to a camp in Crimea, and then he was relocated to occupied part of Kherson Oblast. He was punished for tearing down the Russian flag and replacing it with his underwear. It was kind of an act of bravery, you know. But he was punished for that. He was forced to spend 5 days closed, like in a kind of a prison cell alone. So that was his punishment.
And we're talking about children and who manifest their discontent, their opposition, and they are being treated like criminals by people who are actually war criminals.
By people who claim that they are saving them.
Yes, saving from this. Tetiana, if Sasha is not joining us, maybe you can tell us how is he doing now, how is the treatment going and the rehabilitation here?
Так, зараз Саша проходить реабілітацію, фізіотерапія. На жаль, зробили МРТ за рік, були в Шаріте, робив професор МРТ, так може переклад, або я не знаю, як там, може якісь... В общем, по результатам знімку сказали, що в нього дуже складна ситуація. Але ми надію не втрачаємо. Є клініка в Японії, є волонтери в Японії, які хочуть допомогти Саші. Але чекаємо зараз результати, опис. А так ми просто вдома займаємось вдома. І просто якби тільки фізіотерапія. І ліки. Кожен день приймає дуже багато ліків, знеболюючі, антибіотики і всі інші. Там від шлунку, ну так от, а так більше ніяких процедур не робимо.
So the situation of Oleksander is very complicated. He is doing physiotherapy every day, and they also did a procedure where they checked him up at the Charité here in Berlin, and the results said that it is a very complicated and not so good situation, but there is still hope. And there is also one hospital in Japan and also volunteers in Japan who are willing to help him. And now they can't do nothing more than to wait. They are usually at home. They are doing this physiological therapy. And he's also studying at home. He's taking medicine every day. But yeah, this is the situation of Oleksander right now.
Can he attend classes, be it online or presential? Is he schooled at the moment? Can he attend classes? Can he go to school?
Він закінчив онлайн українську школу, отримав вже диплом по закінченню. І зараз в нього дуже морально, він не дуже добре себе почуває. І зараз ми поки що намагаємося владнати спочатку ситуацію, а потім вже навіть далі буде думати, де вчитися йому онлайн, або десь шукати якусь школу, або навчатися за якусь професію, де можна в його стані займатися онлайн.
I ask this question because there's only 1/3 of Ukrainian children who can actually attend school at the moment, and there's over 3,000 educational buildings in Ukraine which have been damaged or destroyed since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. So even if the children are not deported, even if they are alive, which is also a matter of luck at the moment in Ukraine, their childhood doesn't happen in normal circumstances.
So Oleksander has already finished his online school. He even got a diploma from the Ukrainian school. But his mental health is absolutely not good right now, and the priority is first to set up the health and to enhance this, and then they are going to decide where he will study further.
Thank you. And we've seen also in that documentary Mikhailo Kuleba from Save Ukraine. I've also interviewed him a couple of times. I've been to those bus arrivals, and you cannot imagine it's somewhere in a Kyiv district where parents are eagerly waiting for their children to come back, and then you have this bus with a dozen kids, and they haven't seen their parents for months. It's very emotional. But there's something that you say, it's only a few hundreds out of thousands, and the work is like so meticulous that they're doing at Save Ukraine. Can we talk a little bit about the whole process that Mikhailo Kuleba explains as well, from the moment they make a request to the moment they get a child back?
Yes, it's a really very complicated process, and Russians, they agree to give back children only to their parents or their official guardians. So they deported them like in groups, but they don't agree to retrieve a group of children back to Ukraine. And yes, they are preparing them a lot. They are cooperating with some of our ministers and ombudsman office. They are preparing parents and official guardians how to go through Russia, because they can be interrogated there and be detained for some days. And yes,
and just on that, on interrogations that last several days, one of the last successful operations from Save Ukraine, there's a grandmother who died because she was interrogated for several days, and she had a heart attack, and she died, and she was just there to retrieve her grandchild.
Yes, she died in Russia, and after that, yes, her granddaughter, as I remember, yes, she's still staying there in Russia, and there are no chances to retrieve her. Our volunteers and human rights defenders, they should find these children on themselves on the territory of Russia, and they could be everywhere. We even can't imagine what region it could be. They should go exactly to that families and ask them to give their children back, or to go to social institutions and to explain them that they committed the war crime. And they're a bit afraid of that, as Mikhailo Kuleba also explained me when our volunteers are talking to them about war crimes and the responsibility for that. Yes, and after that, for some days they are going back through some European countries to Ukraine, because it's impossible to go through Russia and occupied territories to Ukraine. And there is also one problem, that some of our children are staying there, in Russia, for more than a year, and they're under Russian propaganda. And there are some cases when they really don't want to go back to Ukraine, because their foster families persuaded them that Ukraine don't exist, and their parents don't want to retrieve them, and so they will have the best life there in Russia, and they also promise them they will have their own flats, and that they will have their great life in Russia.
And you've mentioned this whole circuit, and also in the documentary, Tetiana, you're saying you're 2.5 away from your children, and yet you don't know how to contact them. We have to make clear that even if you're close geographically, you cannot just cross a road and go, because there's a front line in the middle, and that makes things so much more difficult.
Russia also complicates the process, like by all means. It does everything it can to complicate the process. Volunteers sometimes say that even when they are in touch with a child and there are parents coming, and parents are like, hours away, Russian authorities or Russian troops, they can take the child and relocate it. It happens often. So parents have to return back to Ukraine, and then the whole search starts over from scratch.
And they also tried to do that with the 2 orphan teenagers that we saw in the documentary. They wanted to bring them, as soon as they realized that those children were not so helpless, they wanted to take them further away. And also they asked for certificates to parents, like birth certificates. They asked parents to justify that, to prove that they are the actual parents. And sometimes I interviewed a mother who was also a combat medic, like Tetiana. Her home in Vovchansk in Kharkiv region was bombed. She lost everything, including her papers. And then her daughter, her teenage daughter, was deported. She couldn't prove it was her daughter, apart from the daughter saying, "This is my mom," and her saying, "This is my child." She didn't have any paperwork, and it took her months and the intervention of Save Ukraine to get the daughter back.
Yes, we also know about cases when they're forced to take the DNA tests, and parents and relatives should stay there for months to wait the result for this DNA test.
I have a question for Tetiana. You're from Mariupol, and we know what happened in Mariupol, what's still happening now. I was in the Donetsk region a few weeks ago, and there are people still living there, but there are some who will not return. Have you already made a decision? Do you want to come back to Ukraine? What is your state of mind right now?
Так, звичайно. Я взагалі планую туди повертатися, того що повертатися додому, зараз допомогти вирішити з Сашою, як далі реабілітація, ні то. Але треба повертатися на службу, треба повертатися. Я так планую взагалі, а там далі вже як буде.
So, yes, she wants to go back to Ukraine, she wants to go home, she still needs to decide some things because of her son, but she wants to go back to the army and help whenever she can. This is the plan. How it will turn out, only the future can tell.
Well, you're also helping by testifying, so thank you for both.
And I want to tell you about one moment when I carried an interview with Karina, Tetiana's daughter. She told me that she wants to be in military as her mom.
Are there any questions in the audience? Because I think we could keep talking between us, but maybe other people also want to intervene and they have questions to Tetiana, to Olesia, to Daria. Yes? Do we have a microphone?
Thanks very much. This is a question for Tetiana. Could you try to articulate how it is to live with not knowing whether you will see your children again? How is it to live with that? And was there anything that kept you resilient? Did you do anything to cope with it?
Сили давала Надія, і постійно переглядала фото дитини, відео дітей. І все-таки сподівалася, що я їх побачу, але якщо були такі думки неодноразово, що якщо я дітей не побачу, то я піду за ними. Ну, тобто, якщо я б дізналася, що їх більше немає, то я б пішла б за ними, я б не залишилася б більше. Того, що, так.
So the thing that gave her hope and strength is hope and strength. She always had the hope that maybe they're still alive, and she was also looking at photos and videos of them. And even though she also had other thoughts than hope, she was thinking that what if she will not see them? What if they are not here anymore? She would follow.
Yes, I have a little bit of a technical numbers question. You said that in the film it says that around about 20,000 children are confirmed abducted or deported, but one activist is saying quite firmly that she believes that it is actually around 100,000. And I would ask you to elaborate a little bit on what the basis for those numbers are. And I do not doubt them, but there are unfortunately quite a lot of people out there who doubt them, so it's always better to know a little bit more. And the second question is, are there any official negotiations about this issue, either on an international level or between Ukraine and Russia, regarding the return of the children?
Yes, answering to your first question, 20,000 of deported children, it means that they were identified by our officials. It means that their parents or guardians, for example, came to police and told that their child was deported. Yes, but we understand that this amount is not real, yes, and according to open sources, to our databases, yes, our human rights defenders, they're doing such consequence. Russian officials claim that this amount of deported children is much more higher, but we can't believe this information because, like, deportation of Ukrainian children is something that they are proud of. Yes, and so this number is not really is not real. What Ukraine is doing, it's very hard during the war to have any negotiations with the belligerent, with Russian officials. Yes, we're trying to find the third country who can help us in this case and to retrieve our deported children. I know that our deputies and officials from ministers, they're doing a lot abroad, but they and international community should finally act and doing something, because now only our volunteers and human rights defenders are retrieving these children.
And on numbers, it's also quite difficult to have an exact number. We have to understand that not every child can be claimed by a family, because some children are orphaned. There are also families who simply don't know who to turn to claim their children. There are families who also are abroad and they're not sure about the whereabouts of their children. So that makes it all the more difficult. And as to negotiating, we've seen one occurrence in Mariupol of failed negotiation. You've seen that corridor that was shelled. This is a common occurrence. So it's quite hard to negotiate when there's one part that never respects what it promised to do as well.
Hi. I have a little question to Olesia, but first and foremost, thank you for your work in general and this kind of work in particular. This is an incredibly important document. And I have actually two questions. The first one, where can is this movie? Will we be able to find it anywhere in open sources? Where will it be published? I guess probably over the Kyiv Independent. And that's the first one. And the other one is connecting to something that you mentioned shortly about the Crimean Peninsula, that is also in a way used for the deportation of the children from Ukrainian territories. But I wanted just to ask you, what do you know about the role of the peninsula, of the Crimea as well in this process? Because, as you said, Donetsk is one of the main important places for the further filtration, deportation all over the different areas. But do you know anything, which kind of role Crimea plays in this? Because it's also like been occupied for a kind of long time now.
Yes, thank you for your questions. You can watch our documentary on our YouTube of Kyiv Independent. It's available for watching. Yes, and Crimea is also a very important place in this system of deportation. There are a lot of recreational camps where children are detained, and mostly there are children from Kherson region. They were forcibly relocated there before the Ukrainian counteroffensive the previous year, and in pretext of vacation, children were forcibly removed to Crimea. They can remove also children from one camp to another. I know the story when one boy was in 5 camps, yes, and his relatives, they don't know where exactly he is. And finally, he was deported to Russia, and Russian family obtained custody of him.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot for this incredibly depressing but incredibly powerful thing that we've just seen. I don't even know how to call it, but I was going to ask you about the ICC and its role, because I mean, as we all know, Putin and Lvova-Belova have been indicted for the kidnapping of children, which is one of the 5 example crimes given in the UN Convention on the punishment of the crime of genocide. So I hope that one day they will be sentenced for the crime of genocide and will spend the rest of their lives in prison. But we don't know yet. At least we do know that all those, like, of the, I think, 110 persons indicted by the Tribunal for War Crimes in Yugoslavia, all have been captured, and I think all, if they didn't die before the date of sentencing, they all have been sentenced. So I think that gives us a bit of hope that these processes can be effective. And therefore I would just ask you, like, what is your feeling? How actively is the ICC pursuing this, except for having indicted Putin? And maybe also to what extent your work also feeds into their investigations?
We know that the officials from the ICC, they are working in Ukraine, but it's very close information. Yes, human rights defenders are sharing with us only off the rack about their work in Ukraine. But as we know, they are really very effective. And I also believe that one day Lvova-Belova and Putin will be in the ICC, and I also will film that process as well.
I think we're all looking forward to see that documentary. It cannot come soon enough. I would like, if there's no other question there's other questions from the audience, we take the 3 questions together, and we'll answer because we're on a schedule as well.
I wanted to ask about the role of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Are they involved at all in this whole tragedy in a positive way?
I don't know. such information, and I have some meetings with them, and I ask them, why don't you go to some recreational camps in Russia? Why don't you are checking the conditions there? Because there are our Ukrainian children, and they answered me that, oh, we didn't thought about that. That's a good idea. Okay. The Russian officials, according to international humanitarian law and Geneva Convention, should give the list of children to International Committee of the Red Cross, but they don't do it. And as well, International Committee of the Red Cross also is not doing anything. I think that they could be more effective in Ukraine, and they should be more effective.
I just wanted to add in relation to that there are indications that the national federations of Belarus and Russia, Red Cross federations, are involved in the practice, and that inquiries are continuing into this. Thank you all for your work and your courage. I had a question about the children in Moscow. What do you know about how they ended up with these 31 families? Was it a case of, was this how did this quote unquote foster program work? Was it through the church? Was it through the government? Was it through, sort of I don't know if internet services where they have foster children online? What do you know?
You mean about foster families of these children from the list of 31 children?
Yeah,
yes.
How they ended up there with these particular families.
As I told you, that we know that some of them are ex-militaries, and they already have some foster children in their families. So the children from Mariupol wasn't the first foster children, yes, for them. Russian journalists made even some documentaries about them, and they tried to show how great their life there, how they're having arrests, how they're going to school. But the children who are already returned back, they confirmed us that it's Russian propaganda, that it wasn't true. And it also, you see, this case of the children of this group of 31 children, it's a public case, and the ICC is also interested in it, and it's very difficult to have any extra details about them, because they hope that this case would be in the ICC, that there would be some hearings about it. So that's all that we could know from Russian media, the information from Russian media, and from that two boys who are in touch with some of the children who are in Russia. That boys helped me a lot to confirm some information about them.
Okay, last but not least, дякую дуже for this event and for your great engagement, what you are doing. You can see it brings a lot. What I'm asking you is, when children are getting back from their kidnapping from Russia, is there any kind of state program for psychological support that they will be assisted or accompanied during the long period of time in order to get reintegrated, being a Ukrainian and feeling to be proud to be Ukrainian? Thank you.
Our volunteers already organized some programs for these children. It's very sorry for me, yes, to say that we have no state psychological programs for these children, and it's very complicated process of their rehabilitation. You can see the condition of Sofia, that girl from Mariupol, who was first buried her mother. Yes, we see that she needs psychological help, but still she doesn't. Yes, I'm trying to help them also, and I gave them contacts of psychologists, but also our volunteers claim that these children need time to get this psychological help. So they're waiting for them.
I will add also that even though there's so many programs that are already geared towards reconstruction, from like physical reconstruction of the country, but also the mental recovery from it, it's really difficult because infrastructures are being shelled, people are being killed. There's so many people who are taking antidepressants, so many people who have PTSD from living in near the front line, or even just because I personally don't know a single Ukrainian family which hasn't been impacted, which hasn't lost someone from the family or a friend. And today I was reading the statistics, they are what they are, but there's 61% of Ukrainians who are volunteering, who are giving resources, who are giving part of their salaries towards the recovery of their country. It's in education field, it's in medical field, they also subvention their army. And the entire society right now is geared towards defending itself, and afterwards there will be the reconstruction, but it's still a country that is overwhelmed, that lacks the resources it had before. And I think what we miss when we see all the documentaries on Russia's war crimes, we don't see that Ukraine was functioning before the war and had all those infrastructures for children, psychotherapists, etc. But it's a country that is overwhelmed also medically at the moment because of what Russia inflicts to it. I had a last question. You've touched upon it when you asked about the ICC. I would like to ask all of you if you still have hope in international institutions to help in any way and to bring this war to an end.
Yes, of course. And we'll have some presentations abroad, and I believe that I told you that yes, one day Lvova-Belova and Putin will be in the ICC, but also I believe that all Russian collaborators one day will be in our Ukrainian courts, because our prosecutors are doing a lot now during the war.
You have a direct line to one of those collaborators who hung up on you, so. Tetiana, do you still have hope that international institutions will play a role in bringing this war to an end?
Так, ми зараз подаємо результати Сашині не тільки ті, що запропонували допомогу, але й інші організації, і наші українські нейрохірурги теж хочуть Саші допомогти, але він на даний час не хоче їхати в Україну на лікування. У нас є там змога, там нас чекають в будь-який час, але на даний час він поки не готовий повертатися в Україну. І ми будемо намагатися десь в інших країнах знайти. Звичайно, є шанс. Якщо є шанс, і надія є, але дуже тяжко, не всі йдуть на контакт, і коли бачать результати, вони просто навіть не відповідають, просто як зникають. І ось це дуже тяжко. Кожен раз така відмова.
So, yes, they still have hope, and they're also sending the medical results of Oleksander to many different doctors. And right now he doesn't want to go to Ukraine. He's not ready, and they are always keeping an eye open to any chances, to any contacts, also in different countries. They still have hope, but there were many situations where they sent the results to different doctors, and sometimes they didn't even respond. So the situation is very complicated, but they are still not giving up and have hope.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Daria. Thank you, Olesia. Thank you, Tetiana. And I think the future of Ukraine wants to sleep, so we're going to let him rest. Thank you very much also to everyone who attended that screening. Thank you.
And thank you to our moderator who came to us from Kyiv directly from the car, Emmanuelle Chaze. And thank you all for joining us today.